Hello, everyone. Welcome to Build's Character. I'm joined by Lauren Urban, our community manager, and today we're talking about Dungeon Master tips. If you are new to D&D or you've been playing D&D for years, we are just going to go over some of the Dungeon Master tips that we have learned over time and some of like the tried and true kind of key points that really do help every Dungeon Master. So, yeah. So
We're
first off,
building a dungeon master today.
we're building a dungeon master today. We're not building a character. We're building a full-fledged dungeon master. I for myself, I've been dungeon mastering since high school. I have dungeon mastered Heroes of the Veil, Beyond Heroes. For live streams, This Dragon Life, as Guardians of the Multiverse was a game I ran a long time ago, which is how I met actually Lauren, because she was one of 7 people in our Twitch chat.
It was a fun Twitch chat.
It was a fun Twitch chat. Lauren Urban has a lot of D&D credits as well when it comes to dungeon mastering.
Yeah, I've been DMing since 4th edition, so not quite as long, but I've been DMing for on-stream, off-stream campaigns. I've got a long-running podcast that's been going for 5.5 years now, which, yeah, we're level 18. I should probably get to the end of the story at some point. I've run a bunch of campaigns for streams. I've run a bunch of charity games, and recently I've been running a lot of one-shots for our Discord and our community in the last year or so. And you're absolutely right that like every day there's new people who come in to one of our community spaces and says, I'm supposed to DM a game. How do I do this? Which I think is the age-old question. It's, I want to play D&D and I'm going to get all my friends together and we're going to play D&D, and oh, I have to DM now because I'm the one who put the game together. Yeah. And how do you go about doing that? That is a question that it comes up every single day in our Discord. So I'm so happy that we are here to try to offer some suggestions and help.
Yes, and maybe a good refresher for both of us, actually.
That is absolutely true. I mean, as a DM, it's good every once in a while to be like, maybe I should read that chapter of the DMG again. Maybe I should look over that character sheet again. Maybe I should remember how this actually works and not how I think it works, and I've just been homebrewing it the whole time.
Yeah, like reading the DMG is fantastic, by the way. There is a lot of great advice in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I highly recommend reading it. Really, I know for myself, when I first started dungeon mastering, the thing that worried me the most, because I had all these ideas for plot, you know, that I was just in creating my own world. I was very excited for that. The mechanics were what kind of scared me the most, knowing, you know, all right, everyone give me your initiative, combat, you know, all that stuff. That stuff is what worried me. So I tended to read that over several times, just to get the dungeon master side of it, right? Because as a player, you kind of know it, but as a dungeon master, it's like you're now in control. You have to be the referee. You have to be prepared for that. And so preparing is super important, because then that allows you to relax. I find preparation relaxes me when it comes to mechanics or very in-depth plot lines. Otherwise, I'm largely a DM who improvises almost everything else. To an alarming degree. You would be horrified. I will just walk into a session and just run. So
I don't think that's horrifying. I think that's awesome. But I want to take a step back from all of that. And I want to start at the very, very beginning for our new DMs out there, because as I said, there's a lot of people who they've never played D&D before, and now this weekend they're running a game.
Right.
And I want to start there with those wonderful people. Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to run for your friends. I know you're probably panicked. We're here to help. So
it is a lot of panic. It is a lot of fear. Especially when that due date gets closer and it feels like a due date gets closer and closer, and you finally have to like sit around the table or a Zoom call. That's a big day.
It is. And I'm going to preface all of the advice that we're about to give with, remember that you're here to have fun, and your friends and your players are here to have fun, and they want you to succeed. They want you to have fun, and they want to have the game have fun. So if that helps a little bit with the pressure of, oh, I really need to be on top of everything, you're your players are going to be your biggest fans because they want to show up and have fun, and you enjoying yourself and you being confident that, yeah, we can go ahead and have a great time together. That's going to help a lot. So yeah.
That's a good point, because the very first thing I ran was Dragonlance, and I did my own adventures of like Palin and all the brothers of Carmen Megere, however you want to say it in Dragonlance. It was like a continuation of the legacy of like Raceland. And that's the first thing I ran in high school. And what was the best surprise was, oh, I don't have to do as much work as I thought, because your players are going to do a lot of the work. They want to role play. They want to make choices. They want to do these things. That gives you time. That gives you time to think, and that actually allows you to watch your players in admiration sometimes as well. Like, you get to watch just this thing unfold, and you're at the center in a way, like a cog. But it's just kind of a fascinating thing to watch your friends improv and step out of yourself. Because when you're playing a character, you're kind of in your character and you are interacting. But when you're a DM, you're really watching all the players.
Exactly. And so let's start there with, all right, you're going to DM this weekend or next weekend or whatever. It's your first time ever doing anything in D&D. Where do you start? And so you talked about running a homebrew. I actually did the same thing, but I've been a player for a while. So while it was my first time DMing, I'd been playing, and so I was familiar with a lot of I was familiar with playing with my friends. I was familiar with a lot of the stuff just being a player. But there are a lot of GMs that are out there who have never even sat down at a table or virtually on Zoom. So I have some basic advice for you to get yourself started, and all of it's free. Because that's the other hard part when you start in D&D, especially now, having 5th edition been around for a while. You're looking at all this awesome dice and the 3 billion books and all the stuff on DM's Guild and all this content, and it can seem overwhelming. And you need the basic rules, which are free. You need a bunch of friends. I would suggest a bunch of pre-generated characters, because chances are if you're new to the game, they're probably new to the game, and a time that you're going to play and some snacks. That's it. Like, that's really all you need. You don't have to spend any money at first. It also takes a little bit of the pressure off, because the basic rules are a little bit easier, a little bit more condensed to get through. It's going to give you all of the information you need. You're going to be able to skim through a lot of it, because a lot of it's going to be information about subclasses and spells and other things that you don't need to look at right now. Look at the basic rules, read through those, and get a bunch of friends together, decide on a date and a time that you're going to play, have some pre-generated characters so that all of you are familiar with what characters everybody's going to play, and you don't have to try to walk people through character generation, because it's fun, but if you're all new to this, don't even worry about it. Just get some pre-gens, and then decide in advance with your friends, like, okay, this is kind of the tone of the adventure I'm going to run. Get some snacks, and then it's picking an adventure time.
There's also, and to your point of like pre-generated characters, there's also basically the sidekicks, which are the rules for sidekicks that are basically basic D&D. So you only do a couple things. It's very low stress. You get kind of a sense of these kind of archetypes that you play in D&D. And so if you're really nervous about all those numbers and everything, I could totally recommend doing a sidekick. Beyond that, if you want to jump right into being a full-fledged player character, Evocation Wizard is, it's the easiest wizard to understand. It's very helpful in the fact that you're not going to kill your friends probably with a fireball. Beyond that, I would say the Life Cleric. For that, a domain, you're all about healing all the time. The Thief Rogue is just kind of the base rogue. You know exactly what this is. And then, the Champion Fighter. These are all very, very simple subclasses, and they are designed to be so that you can get a feel for everything else that comes later, because things will get more complicated later with different subclasses.
Yeah. And I'm going to suggest, for the first time you DM, you start with a one-shot for a bunch of different reasons. One, it takes a lot of the pressure off of you again, because now you're not having to figure out, how do I prepare for multiple sessions? How do I prepare for a campaign? No, I'm preparing for 3 hours, this one thing, this one very self-contained thing. It also takes some of the pressure off of your players, especially if you're going to use these pre-generated characters, because the idea is we're going to play this game, we're going to kind of get a feel for how everything works and what we like. And then if we like this, if this is fun and we're going to continue to do this, then you can look into rolling up new characters or sticking with the ones you got. Then we can look into a longer campaign. But for your first time out, find yourself a single night adventure. Find yourself a one shot. We've got a bunch of them. The encounters of the week on D&D Beyond are great for that kind of thing and come with everything that you need. There's plenty of places that you can grab a one night adventure, and that kind of limiting what you're going to do is a great way to not overwhelm yourself, because when it comes to preparing for that adventure, there's a ton of advice out on the internet about how to prepare as a DM, and all of it is right and all of it is contradictory, because it's 100% learning what you need to do to prepare. And in my opinion, the only way to really know is to play and to prepare an adventure. And the next time to be like, oh yeah, I'm really good at making this up on the fly, and I'm not so good at making that up on the fly. Or I wish I knew more about this thing and less about that.
Right. And certainly this is not as dangerous, but it's kind of like, I remember being a little kid and learning to swim, and that seemed beyond my comprehension. What is swimming? Like, it's a liquid and I move through it. You don't really know what D&D is necessarily until you play it. Like what D&D feels like to play around the table until you do it. And then you're like, you get it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to know necessarily if you're going to like that character. I didn't. First thing I played was a cleric. It was first edition. My brother said I should play a cleric because I had 4 hit points and I needed to heal. And that was my first one shot. I almost got nothing done. But I learned I didn't love clerics. Now I'm kind of coming around. But that was first edition, and everything killed you. So
things have changed.
You don't be shocked if you're a player or a dungeon master, if you're like, okay, I thought I wanted to run this kind of adventure, or these types of characters were interesting to me. But then you're like, on second hand, I don't think this is my style. You'll be very surprised what you enjoy playing versus what you think you enjoy playing.
And that's also why a one shot is perfect, because that, once again, is like by the end of it, there's a pressure off of it, because if you realize halfway through, I chose a rogue. Nah, I really kind of wish I chose the fighter. Then all right, you know what? I can do whatever I want with this character. It's going to be fun, but I'm having fun in the next time. And the same thing as a DM, like you said, if you thought, I'm going to be a very narrative driven, very focused on the story. And then when you get into the game, what you find is you love the crunch of battles, or you love the dungeon crawls that your players go through, or you wish there was a little more mystery in your games. You can still have fun and then be like, all right, but we'll finish out this adventure. It'll be great. And the next time, now I have a better idea. It's all a learning process.
Absolutely.
And we actually got a question perfectly about this from chat. Do you think it's better to start with homebrewing or with a fixed module or something in between? I think if you're brand spanking new, never played, never DM, never nothing, I suggest finding yourself a module. I suggest finding a pre-written thing, because it's going to answer a lot of the questions that you're not even going to think about. If you've played for a while and have an idea of a one shot in your head that you want to do, then I say go for it. But for our brand new, just having learned about D&D and want to DM, find yourself a one shot. What about you?
It really kind of depends on the group. So sometimes a group that's new can be very linear. You just don't know. They can be very linear. I am an agent of chaos. So as a player, a very simple thing can turn into a very big thing when I'm playing. And I'm probably a nightmare for dungeon masters, but you'd be surprised how hard it is to get people from point A to point B. So say there is a cave filled with goblins who have the town's treasure. That is going to take you 2 hours, possibly. I'm laying you know right now. because a lot of things are going to happen in between. Maybe they have to buy supplies, man. They have to come up with a plan to get the goblins to come out of the cave, because maybe going into a cave with goblins is a bad idea. There's all kinds of things that will suddenly spiral out of just having to get the treasure from these goblins. So I would say, like, don't be afraid to do something very basic like that in terms of homebrew, because modules can be a whole thing as well. You know, these tiny adventures. Certainly, you should read all the way through it, but I think both approaches are perfectly fine. Simple things are sometimes the things that cause the most chaos, as Lauren has witnessed this week. So
No,
I
absolutely.
played in one of her one shots, and I made it so much harder than it needed to be, and because that's who I am.
No, that's one of the other things you learn as a DM, is that at some point it's your idea of an adventure, but as soon as you start to run it, it's now a group adventure. And so whatever happens, happens. So let's talk a little bit about improv, because that's one of the other scary things I find with brand new DMs. It's rules and improv. And you're going to hear with improv, with making stuff up on the fly, it can be daunting. It can feel stressful. You can feel like, especially if you've been watching some of the professionals out there, like Critical Role playing, it can seem like they just have all the answers at their fingertips. And I guarantee everybody's making stuff up all over the place.
And also that, and even if you're watching Critical Role and shows like that, you see Matt whip out the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide all the time. I do love his devotion to rules and looking things up. It can be a very slow process. I've never seen probably another person in my life look up something in a book as fast as him.
He's got those books memorized. It's impressive.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's like, I know what page this is.
Yeah.
Like, he just knows.
And certainly that's a group that's been playing long enough and for a long enough time. And they're a broadcast group, in where they've put an importance on being accurate to the rules. But you'll also watch Matt do something that I suggest most new DMs do, or most DMs in general, but especially new DMs. If you don't know the rules, first off, you don't need to know all the rules. Absolutely, you do not.
No.
And you never will. Jeremy Crawford doesn't know all the rules. He said so himself.
Yes.
If you can't find the answer in about 30 seconds, and especially if you're like doing a search on D&D Beyond, which can be super fast, if you can't find it in about 30 seconds, make up an answer on the spot that seems appropriate for the situation for your group.
And fair.
And then, and fair, and look it up later. Say, I don't know. Here's what I'm going to roll right now. We'll look this up later, just to keep things moving. Yeah. So don't be afraid to admit if you don't know the answer to something, and then come up with an answer that seems reasonable to everybody involved.
As a Dungeon Master, avoid losing momentum. I think momentum's a really big part of playing D&D, and is the most fun. If you're spending all the time looking up rules, things get slowed down, people don't get to their turn, and then people start to disconnect a little bit. So, yeah.
And as far as not knowing all of the rules, your players are sharing the knowing of how to play this game. You do not need to know how all of the characters work. That is your player's job. They should know, even if they're brand new to D&D and they've just sat down with this new pre-built character. Your job is to have prepared some of the rules in the game, and their job is to be at least familiar with their character. They also may not know something, and that's fine. My biggest suggestion as a DM, if one of your players says, I want to go ahead and use such and such an ability, just ask them, oh, hey, what does it say that ability does? And have your player just read it out right there, because chances are they've got it. If it's not on the character sheet, it's on D&D Beyond. It's in their player's handbook. It's at their fingertips, and it's going to be a little easier for them to find it. And then everybody knows. They read off what the spell does, and then you go, okay, so that's what that does. This is how it works. So just ask your players outright, what you want to do this thing? What does it do?
It doesn't have to all be on you.
And it shouldn't.
Now, the other side of this, and you'll see this kind of seesaw of advice, is there is nothing greater for Dungeon Master to do sometimes, in my opinion, is to look at your character sheets of your players and see, okay, this is what they're good at, and set up opportunities to succeed or fail. But if you know someone, loves casting fire, right? Spells, or you know that someone really is super good at sleight of hand. Build that into the game and surprise them. And that's what's fun is that's not a conversation you necessarily have to have with that player. You see their character sheet, that you see what they're good at, and then it's kind of this surprise and delight thing that you took the effort to look at their character sheet and you thought about the adventure and you decided to put some things in there just for them.
And
Because this is way better than a movie. Like this
Yeah.
is a custom made movie. And that's the most fun thing about being a DM.
And that's also really good advice for after your first game or 2 or 3, you know, when you kind of get rolling into a larger campaign, is to do those kinds of check-ins to be able to highlight different people different times, and not just with combat encounters, with social encounters, with things and where you can say, oh, you know, last week we did this awesome combat and my evocation wizard, you know, I made sure that there was this thing that was weak to fire because they're all about fireballs. And so, you know, that made them feel super cool. And this week, my bard, they've got a really high deception and persuasion. I'm going to make sure that there's some NPCs there that they can talk with and try to convince of things and do some roles that way and give them a chance to succeed. And it lets you know what to highlight. But for this first adventure, doing that read over, if you do those pre-generated characters, that also can help a lot, because that can make sure, all right, I'm doing this one shot and I've got these pre-generated characters, and oh, my evocation wizard is all about fire. Maybe I shouldn't put things that are fire resistant into this adventure. Maybe I should pick a different one shot. You know, it can help with things like that, or with on the fly changing things and being like, oh, I didn't think about the fact that my bard is going to want to talk to every single NPC. Maybe I'll make sure that some of them are willing to be persuaded for things. And this kind of dovetails really nicely into that improv idea. There's a lot of advice, as I said, about how do you get good at improv and making up stuff as you go, and every DM has to do it. And I've got 2 basic bits of advice. The first is, when you're in doubt, think about what you would want to have happen as a player. Think about what you think would be cool or fun or exciting, and do that. And sometimes that does mean that the player gets what they want. But if it's cool or fun or exciting and it makes everybody happy and you're stymied for what to do, you're I don't know what should happen next. Do the cool thing, do the fun thing, because everyone will enjoy that.
Yeah, putting yourself in the place of the players is so huge. And if it gets you excited, it will probably get them excited as well. And if it doesn't, then you're going to learn. But it's a lot of empathy if you're a dungeon master, and you should practice tons of empathy above your own plot line and your storyline. Really take a look at, like, what do you think is fun? And I think that's kind of like what starts a lot of dungeon masters, to be honest. I had played with other dungeon masters, and I kind of felt like some of them were wanting in terms of what I wanted to do for an adventure. And I took a lot of lessons in terms of what I did want to do, what I didn't want to do. A lot of it at the time was what I didn't want to do. And so that informed me a great deal. Like, being a player ahead of time can really inform you about being a good dungeon master.
And I definitely think if you're one of the groups that's gotten together and you're going to do this one shot and everybody's new, or most people are new, think about spending a couple of sessions and doing a couple of one shots, and where several people in the group DM. Be like, all right, I got this week. I got a game I'm going to run this week. These are the characters we're going to go, and we're going to give this a try. Next week, why don't you do a one shot for these same characters, and I'll have a pre-gen, and give multiple people in your group chances to be the DM, and also make sure that everybody in the group has a chance to at least play a little bit, because it's not just good for everybody to have experience on both sides, but it's really good for your DM to get a chance to play every once in a while. And when you're brand new, it's good to have that player experience as quickly as possible.
Don't be afraid to rip people off, by the way. I once ran an adventure where I literally sent everyone on a mission that was aliens, only I replaced it with abyssal chickens and one giant abyssal chicken, and I used Adam Bradford's character Briv, his divine sense, as sort of that ping for when infernal creatures get nearby. So at first he like got one ping. He's like, oh, there's something infernal nearby. And then there's 4, and then there are 20, and then there's 100. And you kind of see the panic build in a character who typically does not get panicky. And it was very fun. And all I did was basically take the loose plot line of aliens. And that was my one shot. And it was ridiculous.
There is inspiration for one shots all over the place. As I said, definitely check out our encounters of the week. Those are a wealth of resources of like, here, I can run this in like 2 hours, and maybe a mind flare will just show up somewhere. It'll be fine. It'll be great. Everybody in chat, say hi to Megan. Hi, Megan.
Do you want to say hi? I don't know what's happening right now.
I think she's failing her stealth check. I think that's what's going on. While Todd giggles over that, I will give my other piece of advice for learning how to improv in a D&D game. So my first bit was do what you think the players will find fun, do what you think they think are going to be cool and exciting. My other suggestion is you'll hear a lot of people say yes and. I suggest no but. You're going to have to say no.
No buts?
No buts. Yes. Every character you can't sit. You can't sit at all. No sitting.
It's terrifying.
So yes, comma, and. Or no, comma, but. And the reason for that is as a DM, it's okay to say no. You want to empower your players. You want them to feel like they are the heroes of the story, and you don't want to shut them down. But sometimes it's okay to say no. When someone wants to do something that's pretty much impossible, you don't have to ask for a roll and then the nat 20 comes up and now they're doing weird things. You can say no, but hey, if you like to try this. And so think about that when your players are investigating, struggling, thinking about things, asking to do really impossible things. No, you can't fly because I don't think you know how to fly and you don't have wings. But taking a look around, you can see that there's a rickety bridge and there's a couple of vines and there's what you think might be this magical teleportation, but there's these other options for you. So use that as a way to help propel the story forward and also make it so that your players, they'll want some constraints because players want a challenge to overcome. And if you just say yes to everything, it's not going to feel like they've really made a challenge. So say no, but as often as possible.
Right. Absolutely.